All right. I think we are live. Okay, yeah, we are live. All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session. This, I think, our 24th or 25th live sacred space session. And I hope everyone is happy, healthy, and safe at this time. And I just want to say, as always, I'm just always so honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space together today. So the things we're going to focus on today are we're going to set sacred space as we do every week. We're going to have our overall topic for the session. And this week, I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the 4 yogic paths to the sacred as described and framed for us in the scripture of the Bhagavadgita from Hindu tradition. And then we'll have an exercise, a little exercise after that, and that's it. We'll close sacred space. Gary, I think, is watching. She's she's off camera today. I think she just had a wisdom tooth pulled. So she needs to be resting. She should be in bed right now, but I think she's powering through anyway. All right. So we'll go ahead and start our session. Let me just make sure Facebook is working. All right, seems to be working. And I'll go ahead and start, and we will set sacred space together. So our intention here, of course, is to create a space in our time together here, devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. Okay, a safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no fear of danger or threat, right, from each other or from the outside. And the reason we want to do this is so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together in a group. And so in opening sacred space today, I am proposing, as always, that we follow the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. Number 1, confidentiality. So what is shared in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now here we're online. The video is, the replay will be, sort of available for the general public. Everyone's welcome. So the way we do anonymization, the way we do confidentiality in the sacred space is through anonymization. So you don't have to be anonymous, but if you choose to be anonymous, you would just go into you would come in off Facebook if you really want to be anonymous, and you would choose, you would come into Crowdcast, you would go into the edit profile function, and then you would just change your username to, Mickey Mouse, Harry Potter, whatever, and then you would continue to participate under that username. So the second principle is no threat or controlling, no fixing, no tough love. What are other ways to say this? No intervention, no saying tough things to you for your own good, etc., etc. The goal here in sacred space is to hold space for each other, to be as we are, with no intention of changing them, healing them, improving them, what have you. So that we hold space for each other, to be afraid, to be anxious, to be happy and relaxed, to be okay, to be not okay, right? And to basically hold space for that without any sort of fear, threat, or control, right, coming in, regardless of the intention. Okay. The third principle, which is a corollary to this, is no commerce. So nothing in the sacred space during this period may be sold or recommended or suggested. I can't sell you anything, either because we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring, We're here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. And that goes for me as well, right? When I try to sell you something, there is always this implied sort of fear or threat or control, where if you don't buy my, hair tonic, your hair won't grow out, right? Whatever it is, I may be selling at the moment. And so we don't do that in sacred space. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. That is, that happens in the profane all the time. And as we always say, the profane is just the profane. It's not bad or inferior or worse or whatnot. But there are certain things that are appropriate to the profane, and there are certain things that are appropriate and only work when you're in sacred space. And so we hold and protect sacred space during this period so that we can do the things that are specific and can only be done in sacred space. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us when we come together like this. And then the fourth is no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything, to chat or not chat, to ask questions or not ask questions. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention. In other words, from what you are, not from what you do or provide. Now, I think I have just, I think I've actually messed this up. Just 1 second. Let me redo the Facebook live feed because I think people are not getting me. Should take just a second. Sorry about this. Okay. This will take just 1 second. I apologize. I think I added the stream to my personal Facebook, so all my friends can see me, but I didn't add it to. Okay, I may have just messed it up. Try this one more time. Yeah, I think I'm not able to stream to Facebook. So if any, well, hopefully no one will have any issues with the video, but if you do, the main thing to try is a refresh of the browser. But I think we should be okay today. I think we should be okay. All right, so, okay. So let's keep going here. Sorry about that. So the four principles we want to sort of hew to during our sacred space is confidentiality, no fear, threat, or controlling, no expectation of participation, and no commerce, no recommendations. And so all of us, when we come into sacred space together, will tend to amplify that. Okay. Now, this is what I'm proposing. And as always, if you are not okay with this, right, we will give you a moment now to withdraw from the group. And we will catch up with you later in profane space and hang out still. And so in other words, there's no fear, threat, or control for you to come into the session or stay in the session. Okay. So I'll just give you a moment now to dial that in and make your choice. And for now, we will move together forward into sacred space. So now we are in sacred space together, and as just a reminder, in this space we will hold to the four principles of sacred space: confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce or recommendations, and no expectation of participation. Okay. Thank you for joining me in sacred space. It's so wonderful to be here with you. And so what I want to cover this week is I want to talk about a bit of an obscure topic that is just near and dear to my heart, which is the four yogic paths to the sacred. This is kind of my own, name or designation for this topic. And so these yogic paths come from Hindu tradition, specifically from the Bhagavad Gita, in Hindu tradition. And I'm not going to take time in this session to explain what the Gita is and where it stands. That's a little bit too much of a nerd out for this session. If you're interested in the Bhagavad Gita, Gary, if you're on chat, maybe you can just give the spelling of the Bhagavad Gita so people can Google that if they're interested. So in the Gita, in Hindu tradition, there is a set of 4 yogas that Krishna lays out for Arjuna, the 2 main characters of the Gita, which Krishna holds are the 4 paths to union with the divine. Okay. And when we say yoga, yoga in Sanskrit is a word that means to yoke, right? Yugare in Latin, right? Which means to yoke, like you would yoke an oxen to till the fields, right? So yoke means to join. To join even in a kind of almost like a master-servant relationship with the divine. You join yourself to the divine, and the divine kind of, like we say in my motif, the muse kind of guides me, slaps me around, cattle prods me forward on my path, right? So this feeling of union with the divine. And here, in this sense of the word yoga, we are yoking ourselves to the divine. And the question, which is the ultimate, right? And the question then is, what are the different ways we can do that? Okay. Now, yoga here is slightly different from the way we use yoga in modern Western. Like when you go to yoga class, that also is a valid form of yoga in this higher sense. But the physical yoga that we associate with like wellness and yoga class is typically in these designations called hatha yoga, right? Which is like a physical set of practices which are very much keyed into eventual union with the divine as well. But physical practices that we're more familiar with in popular media are historically, in this tradition, regarded more as preparatory, very powerful, very deep, obviously, but preparatory exercises for this ultimate act of union and yoking and yoga with the divine. Okay. So in the Bhagavad Gita, then, there is a framework of 4 paths of union with the divine that are kind of more this like 30,000 foot level, right, under which other forms of more subspecialized yoga would fall into, just to kind of orient where we are. And so this list of 4 yogas is not the only set or listicle, right, of types of yoga and the categorizations and taxonomies. But the Bhagavad Gita overall has just been, in human history, certainly, but for me personally as well, an incredibly powerful thread of influence in my life. And this specific set of 4 yogas has been a powerful framework for me personally that has helped me clarify what it is I even do in my life and my bliss work, and what it is I even teach, right, in all these talks that I give. Okay. So I have said in the past that my bliss, my meaning and purpose in life, is of course to restore the power of the sacred in our world. Okay. But then how, right? How does this happen? What are the different options for a person to come back into the sacred, to come back into union with the divine? So in the Gita, there are 4 described paths to union with the divine. Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, and Karma. And actually, let me just copy and paste from my notes into the chat so you have what the spelling is for those. Okay, so that's in the chat, and you'll have that as well. Now, Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, and Karma. These are the 4 that we'll go through today, and then we'll have a little exercise, and then we'll close the session. So Raja means king, right, or the royal sort of path of yoga, the royal road. And generally, there are many different ways to interpret these, but generally what this refers to is the monastic tradition, the tradition where you sit, you take vows as a monk, you do meditation, you do hatha yoga, you do all these disciplined practices. But the general, at a high level, Raja, the royal road, is where generally the feeling of it is that you are all in, right? You are all in. This goal of achieving union with the divine is your main full-time thing, right? So it's a monastic tradition. You take full commitment. You don't do anything else. I mean, you know, if you're a monk in an abbey in, you know, the Middle Ages in Europe, you're still brewing beer or, you know, making whatever candles to sort of support the monastery to get by. But you're all there basically to sort of be closer to God in this sense. And so Raja is this royal road, monastic, all-in kind of path. The second is Bhakti. And Bhakti means devotion. And so this is what is referred to as the devotional path of yoga, of seeking union with the divine. And the way devotional yoga works is that you take an object, right, in the phenomenal world. You take an object typically outside yourself, and you focus your devotion and love on this object, person, thing, cause, whatever. And eventually, following that golden thread, you will also attain union in this way. Right? So this object that you focus on could be God. Right? So in this sense, you could say that the three great religions of the God of Abraham, right, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, can all be seen as various forms of devotional yoga, Bhakti Yoga, centered on the God of Abraham. Right? You could also say that you know, having love affairs and romance at this very high spiritual level is a form of Bhakti Yoga. So during the Renaissance, Dante, right, writing the Divine Comedy, and his focus on the beauty of his life, Beatrice, you know, this sort of woman that was the object of his sort of devotion, even beyond sexual, even beyond romantic, reaching this sort of spiritual level. And then, of course, the troubadours of the Middle Ages, all of the songs and poems they sung around this higher form of, like, even beyond romantic, but like spiritual form of love. Another example that comes to mind is there was a story of the Hindu guru Ramakrishna, right, in India. And there was a woman that came to him and said, you know, I would, you know, Master, I have a problem. You know, I find that I just do not love God. I'm not able to love God. Please help me. I'm just, you know, I know I should love God, but I just don't, and I don't know what to do. And Ramakrishna said, well, all right. I mean, isn't there anything that you love? And she said, well, of course, you know, like my little, sorry, that was my little nephew. I love my little nephew to pieces. I regard him as this like little prince, little emperor, and I would do anything for him. I would cook for him and nurture him and protect him. I would lay down my life to sort of save his, if it came to that. And Ramakrishna said, well, then that's fine. You take your nephew then as the face of God that you worship and give your devotion to him. So that is Bhakti Yoga. So far we have Raja Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And now there's two more. But before I get to the other two, I want to start to inject this additional idea that you can mix these different forms of yoga, right? You typically start with one, and then the others start to get pulled into the braid of this golden thread that you're following. Anyway, because of course these are four alternative paths to the divine, which means they all lead to the same place, right? So as you take one and not the other three, and you get closer and closer along the path to the divine, the other three will tend to get pulled in because they all lead to the same place. You're getting closer and closer to basically doing the other paths anyway, because they all lead to the same place. And so examples of this are, of mixing even just the first two, is that you can be a monk in the Abrahamic tradition, a Christian Catholic monk in the Middle Ages, or even now. And even in your monastic tradition, you can subspecialize in being what they call a Marian, right, in the Catholic tradition, where you are especially devoted to Mother Mary as the goddess, basically the goddess of Catholicism and Christianity, or very deeply devoted to Jesus, right, as your personal God, as your personal Savior. And so there, in a manner of speaking, you can be in Raja, right, full on, this is like my full-time thing, this is the meaning and purpose of my life, the royal road. And you have elements of Bhakti Yoga blended as well. The way I do it is not through just abstract meditation, but, you know, focus through my life, through the songs I sing, through the poems I write, on a particular object of devotion, which in the Christian system could be Mary or Jesus, or you know, various saints, etc., etc. So there is this feeling that these are four roads, but can be blended, and are equal in their effectiveness, and are equally valid, right? And the difference is what you as an individual feel more resonant with as your own unique person. Okay? And that's the key. And we will have more examples of this blending as we look at the other paths as well. Okay, so far we've done Raja, we've done Bhakti. So the next, let's do Jnana. So Jnana Yoga is the yoga of direct knowing, right? Direct seeing. Sometimes if you read about these yogas, you'll get different, you know, jnana especially, you'll get interpretations where jnana is like wisdom. Well, I mean, all four of these involve wisdom at this sort of general abstract. Right? When you're talking about something spiritual and you label something as wisdom, it's basically another way of saying, like, I don't know. I don't know the specifics. It's all wisdom. It's all wisdom, right? So jnana, I mean, they're all wisdom, but specifically jnana is the wisdom. Yeah, I'm sorry, we're not on Facebook Live. I messed up the feed, and I only get one shot with the system. So if I were to switch to Facebook Live, I would need to reset the whole thing. So we will post the replay, and we will post the replay on Facebook as well. So I apologize for that. So jnana is the yoga of direct knowing, direct seeing. It is to see the reality of the union that you're seeking. Because as we've said before, right, you seek union with the divine through yoga. Well, it is already union anyhow, right? The union never ends, right? On the talk that I gave a couple months ago on the Tao Te Ching and the nature of reality, where we basically said that there is only one thing that actually exists. And so jnana is this knowing, this vision, this direct perception and direct seeing of this reality. And this is instant union. Because when you see it, you're looking at it, you realize that there's only one thing, and then you look down at the ground and how it connects up to you, and you realize you are the one thing as well. And you have not so much attained union. You were always in the state of union. You are in the state of union now. And you always have been. But what you attain with jnana is the direct seeing of the underlying persistent fact of this union. And that gives you, you know, it's like when you're like, you know, I know I'm in love with this person, I know there's union, but then you're like with, you know, the object of your love. It's this whole next level of like attainment and intensity, right? So it's not something you attain per se, it's something you see and realize. That was always already there and is actually unchangeable. It is, right? Even if you didn't want union, you can't ununion, right? I mean, you can pretend, you can distract yourself and pretend like, you know, I'm Artie and I'm a separate person. And that's fine. That's what we're all doing, actually. And that's okay. But the underlying reality is that there is actually only one thing that exists. And it is. So so just to sort of move around a little bit through different traditions to give you a sense of triangulation. For the Zenists, the Zen Buddhists, right? They have this concept of gradual enlightenment and sudden enlightenment. And Gradual enlightenment, the way I think about that, is more Raja Yoga. It's like, you join, I mean, in the other, you join a monastery as well, and you work hard, and you're all in. But it's more, gradual is more this feeling of Raja, where you're kind of in it for the long haul. You're expecting it to take 30 years. You're not expecting it to be, you're not looking for any shortcuts, as the gradual school would sort of shame the instant school for, right? And the gradual school is characterized by schools like Soto Zen, where it's more sort of plotting, intellectualizing, and they're all merging now. Everyone says, well, we do everything, right? Because they're all marketing, right? But the sudden, right, school of thought within Zen Buddhism is more jnana in this sense. And the jnana sort of side of things is, as opposed to the Soto school, is more the Rinzai school, right? Which is swift, precise, very forceful. But the person you're learning from really has to know what she or he is doing, because there is no sort of backing into it. It's just a direct kind of thing. The way the Rinzai and then early Chinese Zen, right, Chen Buddhism in China, really approached the attainment of jnana, the scene, was with different gambits, right, different techniques. And one example of a very powerful technique is what in the Japanese tradition they called a koan. In Chinese, gong'an, right, gong'an. And we've all heard of these in popular culture. So an example of a koan would be, what is the sound of one hand, and if a tree falls in the forest, does it make its sound? And these are not meant to guide you to union with the divine through an intellectual, reasoning, logical path, but designed to basically transform your consciousness with a lens where you see the unity and the union directly. Right? In some of these koans, the student will ask the master a question, and then the master will take a stick and hit him over the head with it, right? And then the student will be awakened from that. And so there's no linear logic to that, but at the same time, when you see the state of seeing that these methods are trying to get you to, the methods make perfect sense, right? The methods make perfect sense because it is this full-bodied sort of perception. It's a transformation of your consciousness where everything around you, you still see the same things with your physical eyes, but your your embodied perception of them is completely different. And there's really just no words to describe it. So koans, one of the great collections of stories about koans in the Chinese and Japanese tradition is this volume called The Blue Cliff Record, which is a fantastic catalog of these enlightenment stories, and perfectly clear, very demonstrative, accurate, and straightforward when you read them with that lens, right? It basically shows everything. And, people from, say, not to give anybody a hard time, but people from, say, the Soto school, right, who take everything from a very logical, sort of reasoned sort of a path, we'll take something like the Blue Cliff Record and say it takes years of study and it's very dense, it's very difficult. It's only difficult because when you use the lens of intellect and logic to look at it, it's completely unintelligible. But using a different lens, it tends to make instantly a lot more sense. And they call this sudden sort of awakening because when you see it, right, you can't unsee it, right? It is transformative, but also at the same time, you kind of realize once you see it that everything is actually fine, right? Because there's only one thing, and the one thing can't die because there's only one thing that actually exists. It was never born, it never dies. And so, nothing actually dies, right? The forms come and go. Nothing actually dies. Nothing is good or bad. There's only one thing. And you, of course, are also this one thing. Not because oh, me too, I'm like great. It's like, no, everything is this one thing, right? The rock is this one thing. The tree is this one thing. Other corollaries to this, right? You end up losing your fear of death, right? Not because of courage, right? I'm not afraid to die, but because when you see it and you can't unsee it, right? One of the things that is obvious is that there is only one thing. So you never really die because you were never really born, right? Other corollaries just from Kashmir Shaivism, and that will bring out different aspects of the flavor of this realization of the unity with the divine. So you're never really born, so you can never really die, so you don't have to worry. And if you worry, that's okay too, right? But other corollaries, nothing moves, right? Nothing moves because there's only one thing. There is no time, and there are no things. This state that you're in when you see it is a timeless and eternal state. And it's eternal and timeless, right? It's not everlasting. Everlasting is still in the zone of time. It lasts forever time. Eternal is beyond time, right? Eternal is beyond time. And the reason there is no time in this state as well is because there is no naming. As we said in the Tao Te Ching session, right? Naming is how you cut it into 10,000 things. So when you stop naming, you perceive the one thing, right? That's why you can't describe it with words. It's not being elitist. It's just like, it's not, I can't describe it with words, you dumb slob, right? Although people in the profane will take it like that and wield it like that, right? No, it's not. It's like, you're just as, sort of brilliant as I am. It's just, I can't explain it in words because the state itself is wordless, right? So there's no names. And because there's no names, there's not even number. You can't even say 1, 2, 3. And there's no movement because there's only one thing, right? So for my hand to move, there needs to be a background. That's not my hand. That's not moving, right? Because so if there's only one thing, there's like no movement. Nothing moves because there is no second thing. So then, of course, there is no time because for time to exist, you need movement and number. Right, and both of those evaporate when you shift your lens into looking at all of reality as the one thing. So that's all nice and highfalutin, but it's like, what can you really do with any of that, right? And in the sacred, we're like, well, we don't talk about things because we can do useful things with them. We're just talking about the nature of things. We're in surrender. There is no fear, threat, or control. But just to make things a little bit more fun and interesting, when you start with this perception of the one thing, you are also more able to do things like manifestation, because the idea then of something like an archetype makes powerful intuitive sense. Right? Because it's the one thing, and an archetype is sort of like a master elemental pattern in the one thing. And because you start with the one thing, if I'm starting with like the world of like, distracting, desire-making, fear-making, 10,000 things in the realm of the profane, and you talk about archetypes, you're like, I don't even know what that means. But when you start with the blank of the one thing, and then you say a pattern of the number 2, that arises from the one thing, it's much more easy to make intuitive sense of what the heck an archetype actually is from your gut level, not just from your head level, but a feeling level, right? And so once you get it from a feeling level, the physics of archetype are much easier to comprehend. And then you're like, okay, cool. So there's only one thing. I'm the one thing. Nothing matters. Everything's chill. And I don't have to do anything. I can sit here, and even if I die, it's no problem, right? So like, okay, cool. But then there are all these archetypes that you could play with. And then you realize why you started off as this sort of poor slob of a human on the earth in the first place. You're like, well, being over here is fine, but it's boring. And we want to play for no good reason. So we say, woohoo, and we dive back into the phenomenal world of 10,000 things to continue playing and continue delighting in everything, in the lila, right? That you have created and projected, stirred up for your own pleasure and fun. The phenomenal world is a wonder and a horror, and it is. It is. So that's jnana, right? That's jnana. Jnana also, for those of you who have heard me talk about chakra, and maybe I should talk about sort of chakras at some point in this series. Jnana is related to agya, right, which is the name of chakra 6, which is here. And this is the chakra of vision, right? So vision for your bliss, which relates to karma yoga, which I'll get to next. But basically, when you have this vision, this then is the vision, the further golden thread that once you have it, allows you to move up to chakra 7 and beyond to basically beyond chakra 7 is full union with the divine. Right? So agya, jnana, right, is the requirement, the sort of natural step as you move up through the chakra system. Okay, so then we have, where are we? So we have Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, and so the fourth is Karma. So Karma Yoga. Last but not least, we have Karma Yoga, my personal favorite and near and dear to my heart. So Karma means action in Sanskrit. That's it. Just action. Right? Now, when teachers teaching morality and teaching sort of regular religion take karma, they add all these bells and whistles to it, and they say, well, it's punishment and it's retribution. And you could see it like that. You could see it like that. But that tends to be looking at karma through a more profane lens, right? The lens of fear, threat, and control. It's punishment, it's retribution, you better look out. It's even, like we said in the very first session of this entire series, you can look at the pandemic from a profane lens and say, oh, God's punishing you. Mother Earth is upset with you and punishing you. Or you can see it from the sacred lens, which it's more, devoid of fear, threat, and control. What is this thing, this painful thing that we're going through? What things do we know of? What archetypes do we have in our experience? Where something is painful, but the point is not to punish you, and the point is not to put you in fear, threat, or control. And the foremost of these archetypes that comes up when you see it through that lens, the sacred lens, is transformation, right? Is transformation. So pandemic as transformation, not punishment, which was just the theme of our very first session together. So the more sacred reading of the word karma is not punishment or retribution, but simply action, right? And the way this action works is if you do nasty things in a past life, you just spring load stuff to be nasty later, not as a punishment, but it's just as the physics of the thing, because you create your world, right? When we talk about manifestation, when we talk about all of these things, your sovereign power to choose your direction, whether you heal or not, whether you pursue your bliss or not, whether you even come to a sacred space session or not, you are the sovereign of your world. You create your world. You are a creator, not a slave. And if you curse and swear and say you're a slave, you're choosing to do that, right? You have the power to say that you are a slave and woe is me, I'm a victim, precisely because you are the sovereign creator of your world, right? If you want to pretend you're a slave, nobody can tell you anything different, okay? And it doesn't have to go across lives. Like if I do nasty things as a young man, right, I'm spring-loading stuff for my life to be nasty later, right? And it's not as a punishment, it's just the physics of the thing. So if I, poop on my bed and later go to sleep in my own bed and I get poop all over me, it's not punishment, it's just what is, right? You're not a bad person, but you are the sovereign, you are the creator. If I treat my kids horribly as a young man, and then as an older man, my kids are upset at me and they sort of, don't want to talk to me, they may see it as punishing you, but for you, it's not punishment. It's just the stuff you did in early days that then, it's just the physics of the thing. It's just the physics of the thing. So when people whine, oh, it's my karma from my past life, woe is me, there's nothing wrong with that, But even not just the things you did early on, but even the whining now. As an older man, oh, woe is me, it's my karma, my kids hate me, right? It's like, okay. The whining itself is also a part of the world you are creating in the moment as the sovereign of your world. You always get to choose. You always make your world. Okay. And if you make a hellish world, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is your choice, right? I'm not like, oh, you dumb slob, right? You could have a paradise world. I mean, if you're choosing to create a hellish world for yourself, there's probably a reason for that. And when we do healing, we're just like, well, what is that reason? And can we negotiate? Can we negotiate anyway, right? So that's the general idea of karma. And so for karma yoga, then, karma as a way to achieve union with the divine, karma yoga. The formula given in the Bhagavad Gita is the following, which is to pursue the path of karma yoga. What you do is you act without regard for the fruit of the action. That's it. You act without regard for the fruit, the result, the effect of the action. Pure action for its own sake. And when you act without regard for the fruit of the action, all throughout your life, because this is a golden thread that you follow and stay with. When you do this, karma yoga, you act karma without regard for the fruit of the action. You then attain union with the divine. That's the formula. And the fascinating question is, well, why is that? Right? Why is that? So, I mean, I get it. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. It must be true, right? It's like spoken from Krishna himself to Arjuna. So as like an obedient Hindu student, if you're like, why is that? You might get a slap upside the head saying, you idiot. How dare you question, right? But honestly, it's like, why is that? Just out of curiosity. And so for me, when I think about this, the way it breaks down for me is, what is an action you take without regard for its effect? Right, well, what does it mean to act without regard for the fruit of your action? What does that even mean? What does that feel like? To me, it is an action you take for no good reason. An action you take just because you kind of want to, just because you got a little tickle in your mind and it impulsively led you to go in that direction. Because something moves you to do it, but for no good reason. This no good reason, this is sounding familiar. What do you do for no good reason? Well, what is typically a good reason? When your dad yells at you and says, you're doing this for no good reason. What does a traditional dad mean when he say that, right? No good reason from the view of the profane, right? You're studying acting, right? For no good reason, because acting won't make you any money. I mean, this is the classic, sort of profane parent, right, perspective. How are you going to make money doing that? How are you going to get prestige doing that? Who's going to want to marry you? Who's going to love you? How are you going to take care of me in old age doing this and not making any money, right? So no good reason. In other words, no reason that stems from greed or fear. From the session I did on the sacred and profane in art and beauty, to use that vocabulary, no reason that stems from didactics or pornography. No reason of movement towards something, desire, or away from something, repulsion, fear, right? No reason that is kinetic. Action from, in a very deep way, the static, ironically, action from no kinetics, action not from fear and not from greed, but still acting. To use the sort of Joycean term in this context, action that is taken actually from a state of aesthetic arrest. What is the action we take from a state of aesthetic arrest? Right, where we already said in the art and beauty section, you're like stunned. You're rooted to the ground. You have no words. You're in the state of aesthetic arrest. And yet remaining in that state, you take action in the phenomenal world. The only kind of action that you can take where you truly have no regard for the fruit of your action is an action not taken from what we said before, need, want, and desire. Not taken from need. I have to get food, I have to get shelter, or else I'm going to die. And not taken from want. I have to get status, I have to get prestige, or else I'll disappoint my parents, or else my spouse will leave me, or else nobody will like me. I will feel like I lose love. So an action not taken from need, not taken from want, but taken from desire. In other words, for no good reason. I don't even know why. I just like it. And I can't even tell you why I like it. I can make up some psychobabble reason. Oh, when I was a kid, maybe I like Legos. So maybe I was a kid. That was the only way I could soothe. Yeah, but why did you soothe with Legos? Why didn't you soothe with Play-Doh? Right? So when you act out of what we call desire or bliss, you are engaging in karma yoga. So if your bliss as a sculptor, you're like, I just like to sculpt. I don't know what to tell you. And I kind of hate that I like to sculpt because sculpting makes no money in the country that I'm in or whatever, right? I'm poor, right? I'm penniless because I follow my desire to sculpt. And everybody hates me. Nobody wants to marry me. My parents have disowned me because I'm the sculptor. I'm not the investment banker that they were hoping I would become, or doctor, right? But I just can't help it. I just need to sculpt. And the reason I need to sculpt is for no good reason. Certainly no good reason in the profane. And in the sacred, who even knows? All I know is I need to sculpt and I can't do anything else. Right? That's desire. That's bliss. So when I teach bliss, I am teaching the path of karma yoga. And when I teach healing, healing becomes then a kind of preparatory phase to bliss, a companion action to bliss, where you clear the wound in order to flow through the bliss in a state of karma yoga, right? And then you hit the next wound that blocks you, and you drop into like need and want. So you go back into healing, and you clear that if you want to go into even deeper bliss. You don't have to go into deeper bliss. You don't have to do any bliss, right? But typically that is the dual piston action that circumambulates you into deeper and deeper forms of bliss throughout your life, right? The crown of the tree grows higher and higher, but at the same time, right, the roots of the tree go deeper and deeper. If you continue trying to like do highfalutin bliss stuff, but you don't go deeper into your, like wounding side, the tree falls over, right? Because upper and lower have to like mirror each other if the thing is to be balanced and not fall over, right? So this then, bliss as karma yoga, is, in the framework of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the four equal and equally effective paths of the sacred toward the divine. Bliss is the thing that is a valid path toward the divine, toward union, yoga, with the divine. Bliss also, just to sort of connect some dots here, is the thing you do for no good reason. And to take Gowry's sort of insight on this, and it's bliss when you think about your bliss, and when you don't do it, it does not hurt. So when I don't sculpt, it doesn't hurt. I'm like not really getting much delight from anything else in my life. This is the only thing I get delight from. But when I don't do it, it doesn't hurt because there is no wound around the fact that I love to sculpt. I don't sculpt as a soothing to like get my mind off a deeper wound, right? That's a good reason to sculpt. There is no good reason why I sculpt. Similarly, there's no good reason why I'm a healer. I just like it, right? So in the realm of bliss and karma yoga, there is no fear, threat, or control. It is the action you take without regard for the fruit of action, right? When I drink whiskey, when I numb with sex and relationships, when I shield by getting more prestige from my job, right? There is fear, threat, or control. There is very deep attachment to the outcome of the situation, right? If I make $100 million as a high-tech captain of industry and everybody around me yawns and is not impressed at all, I'm frantic. I'm like, this is the reason, the reason why I even did all this was to impress you all, right? So I care about the fruit of the action, right? You care about the fruit of the action. So you don't, bliss, karma yoga is the thing you do, that is the thing that you don't do in order to stop hurting, right? When you do it, it doesn't help you're hurting or not. It's just, it's for no good reason. Said another way, this is the action you take based on what you desire. Right? In other words, based on your innate flow and pattern. In the Bliss program, we call it 自然, your innate nature, right? And so, actually, I should probably, let me do a quick screen share here, and I'll just write we can't just type it. How do I do this? Okay, and then, so in Bliss we teach 自然, 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 Chinese 自然. Sorry. 自然. Zi means self. So 自杀 is self-kill, so suicide. 自然 is self, ran is so. The way it is, or voila, right? Ran is like just the way it is, blah, right? So self, blah, the way it is. And this is the Chinese word for nature. Because nature is the thing that is just itself, blah. The trees just go blah, and the birds go blah, and the sun goes voila, and it's just with no intention. It just all just happens, right? And when great works of art bring us to the state of nature, we are in aesthetic rest. Okay, so let's go back to. All right, so I think. Okay. So it's the action you take based on what you desire. Oops. Sorry, I'm getting a little tangled up here. Based on your innate flow and pattern. We call it 自然, your innate nature. It is literally the Chinese word for nature. So the things you are drawn to do in your life for no good reason, just because. And when you do this, right, you don't do it out of fear, but also when you do your bliss, all these additional blessings will rain down on you and the life of the world around you when you do your bliss. But that's not why you do it either, right? So for me, like I do my bliss is doing this healing sort of bliss stuff, right? Teaching people about this. And I make money from my bliss. I get from some prestige from doing my bliss too, but that's not why I do it, right? There's tons of other ways to get money and prestige at the want and need level. I was a tech CEO. I went to Harvard and Stanford. Believe me, I know there are a million ways to make money and prestige in this world. And you know about some, you don't know about others, depending on the kind of mentorship you get. But also, when I do my bliss, other people benefit from it as well. They get healing, they get help finding their bliss and feeling calmer and stronger and more blissful. And that's great too. And I love that. But that's not why I do it either, right? Because similarly, there are tons of other ways. If I wanted to help other people, I could help other people, right? It does not have to be in the way that I do it here. I could run a nonprofit to help, get clean water to kids in Africa, right? I could do volunteer work. But this bliss way that I do it is the thing that I do truly for no good reason. I would do it even if it cost me money and prestige, which it has, right? I would do it even if it does not happen to help anyone else. Because when I started doing this, I had no idea all these people would resonate with what I talk about. I just talked about what I wanted to talk about, right? And so even if it does not happen to help anyone else, you do it anyway, because that's just how you flow from within, right? For me, I have my own Ziran, and this, I don't know, phenomenon that arises out of Ziran that I call the muse, that like whips me and cattle prods me to continue doing it, right? Whatever. So that's karma yoga, right? That's what I teach. That's what I teach. And the reason I teach it is for no good reason. That's just what I like to teach. And so when people see me on screen or doing my work, they're like, oh, he's so inspiring, right? Why am I inspiring? Is it because I'm so selfless? I'm a martyr and I'm like doing this to help other people? That's not the feeling that you get, especially when I've talked to people about this. It's not that I'm killing myself to help other people, right? Other people are being helped and that may be part of it, but that's not really the nut of it, right? Is it that, oh, I'm getting all this money and prestige? I mean, believe me, there are ways, much easier ways to get much more money and prestige. So that's not what people are admiring in me either, right? It's this third thing where it's like this guy or anybody else like me, right? When the plumber comes to your house to fix plumbing, and you can just tell he is in this nerdy zone of enthusiasm about copper pipes versus non-copper pipes, and he's getting into it, and you're like, am I paying? Is he like cheating me because he wants to spend more time? It's like, no, this is a fixed rate. I'm only charging you for an hour of my time. And he goes on for 3 hours, like fiddling and doing all this stuff, right? And he leaves and you feel great. You feel inspired. Why do you feel inspired? It's inspiring to be in the presence of someone, anyone, who is in the flow of their Ziran, who is acting through karma yoga, who is, to put it another way, acting in the world. This like hurricane is happening all around them, but at the center of it is the state of union with the divine and aesthetic arrest, right? All this stuff is happening. I've got all these projects going and everything, but at the same time, people are like, I just feel calm when I'm around you. And this is true of many people who are like in their bliss. There's like a whirlwind of activity, but there's just this feeling of almost what I would call aesthetic arrest, right? So I like karma yoga. I practice karma yoga in a sense, not intellectually, not intentionally. Just karma yoga is like the pattern that my life has taken, right? That's why I'm here talking to you and I'm not in some cave somewhere, right? That's what I teach. I do not teach Jnana Yoga, direct seeing and enlightenment. It's utterly boring to me. I have zero interest in like actually teaching it, trying to like, it's like banging on a TV where the picture is not clear. It's like, I can't think of anything more boring. But actually even more uninteresting to me are teaching Bhakti Yoga and Raja Yoga. I'm just like, oh. And so why do I personally prefer karma yoga? And the reason is there's no good reason. I just do. Just like the guy who's a sculptor. Why do you prefer? Why don't you go be a hedge fund manager? He's like, I don't know. I wish hedge fund management was my bliss, but it's not, and I can't really do anything about it. I wish I was a dolphin or a whale, but I'm not. I'm a human, and I can't really do anything about that, right? So why do I prefer karma yoga? For no good reason. I just do, and so I just do karma yoga. Come what may, let the chips fall as they will. I don't care what the result is. Right? So in a very real and visceral sense also, to give you this direct feeling of it, when I am in sacred space session with you here and now, I am very profoundly practicing de facto, right, karma yoga right now. This action of sharing these nerdy ideas with you on a Sunday morning is my bliss, or part of it. And I do it as kind of just this expression of love to the world. It's a love letter to the world, written without regard for the result or fruit of the action. But I'm not expecting a return letter from the world. It's just this explosion of like the flowers just exploding in the middle of the jungle, whether anyone sees it or not. The action of this explosion, this expression of the love letter, right? If like there's hundreds of you out there or there's 0 out there, right? This action is the yoga, the union, right? And for those of you who are more energy sensitive, you may feel this directly even as we gather here in sacred space and feast on the nourishment of the sacred that we are all generating together in this shared space devoid of fear, threat, and control, right? Ripe for the experience of aesthetic rest. And then typically 1 or 2 guys, guys like me or Gowrie, talking about stuff, and you feel the sort of something, whatever it is. And it's just pure expression. Now, in my experience, right, when you start to follow one golden thread, it starts to pull in the other yogas too, as we said, because as you get closer, the other, it's like this funnel, right? So you start over here, but as you get closer, the other 3 start to funnel together and braid together as well. So in my case, right, I start with karma, and then as I follow the golden thread of my karma yoga, I end up doing all 4 anyway, right? So I do Bhakti Yoga. What is the object of my devotion? Obviously, you are the object of my devotion, right? I mean, my love letter is to you, right? And yeah, I mean, holding all of you as the object of my devotion, it does help me see the divine, the one, more clearly. Yes, okay, fine, jnana. So that's bhakti. And then jnana comes into it because, as I progress more and more, even through the topics, even through the experience, even through my own clarification as I do these talks of the fact that, I'm kind of in this moving, kinetic state of static aesthetic arrest, right? Where the profane and sacred come together and it's all one thing, right? And that fires my seeing, my vision, my jnana yoga, right? So bhakti and jnana get pulled together. And then, of course, as any of you who have done Bliss with me know, and you start pursuing the golden thread of your Bliss, it becomes this like not side thing anymore. It becomes like the whole thing. You figure out like how to make money through your thing so you don't starve, starts to fall from the sky as well, right? So you end up doing your Bliss full time, all in, right? You don't even take monastic vows, but it's basically like there is no separation anymore between my Bliss work and my life. It's all in, it's all consuming. It's what you live, eat, drink, and breathe, i.e. you then flow into a state of Raja Yoga, where it's all in. You're just as nerdy or even nerdier than any monk, any Tibetan monk up on the hill or in the cave, doing your Bliss. So in my example, I start out with karma and I just kind of follow blindly like a blind pig, as Hemingway would say, the golden thread of my karma. And then I end up doing bhakti, jnana, and raja as well. And it makes sense that that would happen because all 4 yogas are equal. They lead to the same place and they lead into each other, like in my example. So, but there are countless other examples of the 4 yogas blending as well. And one example I like to use is this example from the Hindu Buddhist tradition. So in the Hindu Buddhist tradition, there is this figure, this persona called the Bodhisattva. And the idea of the Bodhisattva is that, they are a reflection of, they're a type of Buddha, basically, who takes the vow to not fully go into enlightenment. So in other words, not go fully into jnana. So to not cross the line into full jnana enlightenment, but stay back here in the regular world. Okay. But I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. And there's a reason why it doesn't make sense, which I'll explain in a minute. But it doesn't really make any sense because if they are bodhisattvas, then they are enlightened. The reason they're doing this is because they're enlightened. Right? So to say, I have attained jnana, but I don't fully go into jnana, all that means is that I'm doing something almost as a gambit, right? As a gambit to help other people because it's what I want to do. Because the reality is once you have crossed into jnana, you can't unsee it. So you can say, oh, no, I'm going to like step back over the finish line. The time is set. You can't unsee what you've already seen. Okay. Now you can pretend not to see it, right? Which is more in the flavor of this. You can pretend for the sake of fun and delight and play that you don't see it, as basically all of you are doing right now, right? But you cannot actually unsee it. Okay. So the bodhisattva pretends to not go over, even though there is no difference between here and there, because it's all one. There's only one thing that actually exists. But then the reason they do so, the reason they're holding back from full realized enlightenment, is so that they can stay in this world and save all sentient beings. Bhakti Yoga. Devotional yoga, where the object of their devotion is not the nephew or the God of Abraham or Jesus or Mary or Buddha. Nothing wrong with those. But the object of devotion for the bodhisattva is all sentient beings. How do you even get to that level of grandiosity without having been enlightened in the first place? Right? It's like, obviously they're like coming back to do this song and dance in order to express this love letter of trying to save all sentient beings. Obviously, they're already enlightened. They wouldn't be doing any of this if they weren't already enlightened. And then they take the vow to never enlighten fully until all sentient beings have been saved and have attained salvation, which of course is impossible, right? It will never be done. Not because I'm a pessimist, but because that's how the physics work. There will always be suffering. There will always be death and fear as long as you have life. You can't have life without death. Every life lives off the death of another. And you can't have life without death, just like you can't have sacred without the profane. There is no sacred without the profane. They are two sides of the same coin. They create each other. This, I think, is brought forth in chapter 2 or 3 of the Tao Te Ching, which I won't get into now. But basically, this doctrine, so in the Taoist tradition, it's that, but in the Buddhist tradition, they have this thing they call it's very fancy, this doctrine of mutual arising. And all that means is that one thing creates the other, right? You can't have sacred without profane. You can't have life without death, because one creates the other mutually at the same time. So when I say right, I imply left. In other words, when I say right, I create left. When I say up, I create down. And when I say good, I create evil. Okay. So it's impossible. You can't do it. It can't be done. You will never stop all suffering as long as the world is turning. But then the bodhisattvas take the vow to do it anyway and take action, karma, to save everyone anyway, even though it is futile. In other words, they act without regard for the fruit of the action. Karma Yoga. So in the example of the bodhisattva, they obviously, in this hidden secret way, they start with jnana, because they wouldn't be doing any of this if they didn't see the whole thing anyway. They step back in order to express bhakti, right, for no good reason, karma yoga. They express bhakti as this pure upwelling of love for the world. And then they take the vow to do something that's obviously impossible, but they don't care, they do it anyway. So their form of bhakti, their object of bhakti is all sentient beings. And the form of their devotion is to engage in this everlasting, forever futile act of karma yoga. In that one vow, all 4 actions come together, right? And who else can do something, an elegant action like that, if it's not an enlightened being, obviously, right? So this then, they've combined jnana, bhakti, and karma in one action. And by doing that, this is their full-time job. This then rolls up into the bodhisattva act of Raja Yoga, the royal road, right? So in doing one, leading to another, and leading to the other, it becomes their all-encompassing, even after death, theoretically, right? On and on throughout all eternity, this archetype, this eternal archetype of the Bodhisattva, blends all four in this way. But even then, it's not the only way, right? It's just one very lovely example. My way of healing and bliss is not the only way. It's just another lovely example. And you can come up with your own way too, with your own lovely example too. The way you would do that is you would start with the one you resonate with the most, right? Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, Karma. And then just follow that golden thread in your life. And it, just like in these other examples I've given you, will lead to all the others coalescing and braiding together as well. Now, this framework of the four yogas of Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, Karma is just one of the gifts and treasures of the Bhagavad Gita. There are so many others within the Gita, but this is a big one. And so in kind of bringing forth this treasure to you from the Bhagavad Gita, it's just, I mean, you can pick it up anywhere and read it, right? I hope you're finding it interesting. I hope it whets your appetite to find out more on your own, as I lay it all out for you here. And I hope that now that you do have it in your life, this framework, that you will make use of it if you want, only if you want, right? And that this framework will serve you well. Okay. So that's it. That's basically the talk I wanted to give. I hope that was helpful. And so I want to end before we close the session by giving you an exercise. And this exercise is pretty straightforward given everything I've teed up here. But the exercise to do between now and next session, well, to do for the rest of your life, really, but only if you want, it's only a suggestion, only if you want, is to just alone with yourself quietly, maybe with a sheet of paper, to consider the four yogas: Raja, Bhakti, Jnana, Karma. Raja, full monastic, all-consuming life practice path. Bhakti, devotional practice path. Jnana, a practice path based on direct seeing of the divine. And Karma, a practice path based on action for its own sake. Bliss is one way of expressing this. And finding and following your bliss and meaning and purpose in life at the sacred level, without regard for the fruit or the result of the action at the need or want level. And so to consider these four, and then to consider for yourself, which, for now, single path, if you only had to pick one, what would it be? You don't have to only, I mean, they all lead to the same place anyway, but just for the sake of crispness and clarity, which single path resonates the most for you now, in this time in your life? So maybe as earlier in your life, you're like, oh, I want to join the seminary. I want to become a priest. I want to become a monk. And you're like, that's not for me anymore. Now, whatever it is in this part of my life, what is it now? Not what it was before, not what it should be, right? Fear, threat, and control, not what it should be, and not what you think it might be in the future, but here in the moment, now. Which of the four paths resonates with you the most? And then to reflect on, I mean, if I were to even think about doing something like this, what would that path even look like given where I am in my life right now? How would I even get to the racetrack to even start to consider joining the race? Because I'm not even anywhere near that, right? And that's okay. And then with that, then to start to just lightly brainstorm how you might align your life to be more conducive to letting that path toward the divine flow, like surge forward, kind of trickle initially and then surge forward in your life, and then more and more over time. Okay. And then just write that all down. Just barf it out on the paper, right? It doesn't have to make sense. Just put down all the notes. Let that line of inquiry just like spill out on the paper. And then don't even read it. Read it like a week from now, a year from now. But make sure you have it somewhere so that you can refer to it in the future. Okay. So that's it. That's the exercise I have to suggest to try. And again, it's only a suggestion. Do it only if you want, only if you want. No fear, threat, or control. Okay. All right. So that's it. And if you have questions, feel free to post them, and then we'll collect them into a Q&A session in the next month or so. So now I will go ahead and close the session. Our next session is Sunday. It's free. It's open to everyone. Please invite others. Ask any questions you like, and we'll gather them into a Q&A session. And then in your Crowdcast, you have the green button, call to action link to sign up for next week's session. I think we have the next 3 or 4 weeks available to sign up. So you just keep going through the green buttons, through the Crowdcasts. And so with that, I'll close the session. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with me today. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.